Okay, I need to get this off my chest. This is the story of how I, Heather, a 32-year-old financial accountant with 8 years of dedicated service to one company, faced the most disgusting injustice imaginable, and then took my fate into my own hands. I always believed in honesty and that hard work pays off. Maybe I was naive. You know that feeling when you think you know someone and then they completely you? That's exactly what happened to me, and honestly, I'm still processing it all. But let me start from the beginning because this story, oh boy, this story has everything. Betrayal, corporate politics, a little bit of strategic revenge, and ultimately, justice served ice cold. So there I was, 8 years deep into what I thought was my dream company. I'd started as a junior accountant right out of college, and man, did I work my ass off. 60-hour weeks, normal, coming in on weekends to fix someone else's mess, just another Tuesday. I genuinely loved what I did, though. Numbers don't lie, you know. They tell a story, and I was really good at reading that story. Over the years, I developed these incredibly sophisticated financial optimization schemes. I'm talking about strategies that saved the company millions, literally millions, in operational costs and tax optimization. These weren't just basic accounting tricks that any fresh graduate could implement. No, these were complex, multi-layered approaches that required deep understanding of both our industry and financial regulations. I'd spent countless hours researching, testing, and perfecting these systems. My colleagues respected me. Hell, even the senior partners would come to me when they needed someone to untangle a particularly messy financial situation. I was the go-to person for anything complex or sensitive. And you know what? I took pride in that. I really did. But here's where things get interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely infuriating. About 6 months ago, our longtime CFO announced his retirement. This was it, right? This was the moment I'd been working toward for 8 years. The CFO position was basically calling my name. I had the experience, the track record, the deep institutional knowledge. I knew every single financial process in that company better than anyone else. My optimization schemes alone had probably funded that position's salary for the next decade. I remember the day I heard about the opening. I was so excited I could barely contain myself. I spent the entire weekend updating my resume, preparing for what I assumed would be a formality interview. I mean, who else could they possibly consider? I'd been essentially doing half the CFO's job anyway for the past 2 years. Monday morning, I walked into the office with this confidence I'd never felt before. I was ready. I deserved this. And then, my direct supervisor, who'd recently been promoted to vice president, called me into his office. Now, let me tell you about this guy. Let's call him Richard because that's what he was, a complete Richard. He'd been with the company for about 3 years, came in at a senior level because of some connections he had. Nice enough guy on the surface, always smiling, always asking about my weekend. But there was something about him that always felt calculated, like every conversation was a chess move. So Richard calls me in, and I'm thinking, great, he's probably going to give me a heads up about the CFO interview process, maybe some insider tips. Boy, was I wrong. Heather, he says, settling back in his leather chair with this smile that I now realize was absolutely predatory. I have some exciting news. We're getting a new team member, and I'd love for you to help bring her up to speed. Okay, cool. Training new people was part of my job. I was actually pretty good at it. Her name is Lisa, he continues, and she's my niece. She's young, ambitious, and she's got a real head for numbers, fresh out of business school with her MBA. And there it was, the first red flag. But you know what? I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe she really was talented. Maybe this was just a coincidence. I'd love for you to take her under your wing, Richard continued. Show her the ropes, especially with those brilliant optimization schemes you've developed. She'll be working closely with you on all the financial strategy projects. Working closely with me, on my projects, the projects I'd spent years developing. I felt this weird knot forming in my stomach, but I smiled and nodded. Of course, I'd be happy to help train her. Wonderful, Richard beamed. And Heather, I really want you to share everything with her, all your processes, all your strategies. really give her the full picture of how things work around here. Share everything with his niece, who would be working on my projects. I left that meeting with a sick feeling, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe Richard was just looking out for his family. Maybe Lisa really was qualified, and this was just an unfortunate coincidence in timing. Lisa started the following Monday, and I have to admit, she seemed nice enough. Mid-20s, bubbly personality, always eager to learn. But here's the thing, and this became clear pretty quickly. She had absolutely no idea what she was doing. I'm not talking about normal new employee learning curve stuff. I'm talking about fundamental gaps in knowledge that should have been covered in any basic business program. She'd ask questions like, "So when we say cash flow, what exactly does that mean?" Or, "Why do we need to track expenses separately from income?" These were questions that made me stop and think, wait, didn't you just graduate with an MBA in finance? But I kept training her. Day after day, week after week, I patiently explained concepts that should have been second nature to someone with her supposed qualifications. I showed her our systems, walked her through our processes, and, because Richard had specifically asked me to, I started teaching her about my optimization schemes. Now, these schemes weren't just simple cost-cutting measures. They were sophisticated financial structures that I'd developed over years of experience. They involved complex interactions between different revenue streams, strategic timing of expenses, and nuanced interpretations of tax regulations. Most importantly, they required constant monitoring and adjustment based on market conditions and regulatory changes. These weren't set-it-and-forget-it systems. They were living, breathing strategies that needed someone who understood not just the mechanics, but the underlying principles and potential risks. But Lisa was taking notes like she was in a freshman lecture hall. She'd write down everything I said, word for word, without seeming to understand the connections between different concepts. When I'd try to explain why certain adjustments were necessary, or how to recognize warning signs that a strategy needed modification, she'd just nod and write it down. It was like teaching calculus to someone who hadn't mastered basic algebra. But I kept at it, because Richard kept checking in, asking about her progress, emphasizing how important it was that she really understand the full scope of our financial operations. Then came the day that changed everything. I was working late, again, trying to finish a quarterly report while also preparing training materials for Lisa. The office was mostly empty, and I was walking past Richard's office to grab something from the printer when I heard him on a phone call. Now I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when someone's talking loudly enough that you can hear them through a closed door, and when what you hear makes your blood run cold, well, you tend to stop and listen. "Yes, I know she's young," Richard was saying, "but she's family and she's eager to learn. Heather's been doing an excellent job bringing her up to speed on all the financial processes." My heart started racing. Were they talking about promoting Lisa to work directly under the new CFO? No, Richard continued. "Lisa will be perfect for the position. She's getting a complete education in all our optimization strategies from our current expert. By the time the transition happens, she'll know everything she needs to know." The position, the CFO position. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach, but it got worse. "Trust me," Richard was saying, "this arrangement is perfect. We get someone young and moldable in the CFO role, someone who will be grateful for the opportunity and loyal to the leadership team. And we're essentially getting all of Heather's expertise transferred over without having to deal with. Well, you know how senior employees can get, always wanting more money, more recognition." I stood there in the hallway, frozen. They weren't just passing me over for the promotion. They were using me to train my own replacement. They were making me dig my own professional grave. But wait, it got even better. "The best part is," Richard continued, "Heather has no idea. She thinks she's just training a new team member. She's been so helpful, sharing all her proprietary strategies and processes. By the time we make the announcement, Lisa will know everything Heather knows, but she'll be much more manageable." Manageable. That was the word that broke something inside me. I'd given 8 years of my life to this company. I'd saved them millions of dollars. I'd worked weekends, holidays, late nights. I'd turned down other job offers because I believed in loyalty, in hard work paying off, and they thought I was too difficult to manage. I walked back to my office on autopilot. I sat down at my desk and stared at my computer screen, but I wasn't seeing anything. My mind was racing, trying to process what I'd just heard. They'd planned this, the whole thing. Richard's request for me to train Lisa, his emphasis on sharing everything, it was all a setup. They were stealing 8 years of my work, my expertise, my innovations, and handing them over to someone whose only qualification was sharing DNA with the vice president. And you know what the worst part was? They'd made me complicit in my own betrayal. Every day I spent training Lisa, I was essentially writing myself out of the company's future. I went home that night and barely slept. I kept replaying Richard's words. Manageable, young and moldable. Heather has no idea. The disrespect was breathtaking. Not just the fact that they were screwing me over, but the casual, almost amused way Richard had talked about it. Like I was some naive little worker bee who'd never figure out what was happening. But here's the thing about underestimating someone who spent 8 years mastering complex financial systems. We tend to be pretty good at thinking strategically. By morning, I'd made my decision. If they wanted to play games, I'd play games. But I was going to play to win. See, Richard and Lisa had made a crucial miscalculation. They assumed that learning my optimization schemes was like learning a recipe. Follow the steps, get the result. But my schemes weren't just procedures. They were complex systems that required constant judgment calls, risk assessment, and deep understanding of underlying principles. More importantly, they had hidden vulnerabilities. Not intentional or anything illegal, I'm not that kind of person. But any sophisticated financial strategy has points where a lack of experience or understanding can turn optimization into disaster. It's like the difference between a skilled surgeon and someone who's watched a lot of medical shows. Sure, they might know the basic steps of an operation, but without understanding anatomy, recognizing complications, or adapting to unexpected situations, they're going to kill the patient. I realized I had a choice. I could fight the decision, maybe go to HR, maybe threaten to quit. But where would that get me? Richard was a vice president with connections. I was just an accountant, no matter how good I was. They'd probably just accelerate their timeline and push me out sooner. Or I could let them hang themselves. You see, my optimization schemes weren't just successful because of their structure. They were successful because I was constantly monitoring them, making tiny adjustments, catching potential problems before they became real issues. I'd built in safeguards and warning systems, but only I knew how to read them. If someone tried to run these systems without that level of oversight, without understanding the warning signs, without knowing when and how to make adjustments, well, let's just say the results wouldn't be pretty. So I made a decision that I'm still not sure was ethical, but I'm absolutely sure was justified. I continued training Lisa, but I changed my approach slightly. Instead of teaching her principles and judgment, I focused on procedures. I gave her step-by-step instructions for implementing my schemes, but I didn't emphasize the monitoring and adjustment processes that made them safe and effective. When she asked about the warning systems I'd built into the processes, I'd give her the technical explanation, but I didn't stress how critical they were. It's like teaching someone to drive by showing them how to start the car, put it in gear, and press the gas, but not really emphasizing the importance of watching the road or understanding traffic signs. Technically, you've taught them everything they need to know, but practically, they're going to crash. I wasn't sabotaging anything. I wasn't creating problems or building in failures. I was simply allowing the natural consequences of inexperience to play out. The schemes I'd developed were genuinely brilliant, but they were also inherently risky if not properly managed. The high returns came with high stakes. Without proper oversight, they could easily backfire. But Lisa didn't know that, and apparently neither did Richard. 3 weeks later, Richard called me into his office again. This time, his demeanor was different. still smiling, but there was something forced about it. "Heather," he said, "I have some exciting news to share with you." Here we go, I thought. "As you know, we've been conducting a thorough search for our new CFO," he continued. "It's been a challenging process, really looking for someone who understands our unique financial landscape and can build on the excellent work that's already been done." Build on my work, he meant. "I'm pleased to announce that we've found the perfect candidate," Richard said, his smile getting wider and more fake by the second. "Lisa will be taking over as CFO starting next month." I sat there for a moment, letting him think I was shocked, which I was, but not for the reasons he thought. "Lisa," I said, putting just the right amount of surprise and disappointment in my voice. "But she's only been here for a month. Are you sure she's ready for that level of responsibility?" "Oh, absolutely," Richard said quickly. "She's been working so closely with you, learning all our processes. And with your excellent training, she really understands our optimization strategies inside and out. Plus, she brings fresh energy and new perspectives to the role." Fresh energy, new perspectives, translation. She'll do what she's told and won't ask for raises. "I see," I said. "Well, congratulations to Lisa. I'm sure she'll do great." "I knew you'd be supportive," Richard beamed. "And of course, we'll be counting on you to continue working closely with her as she transitions into the role. Really make sure she has everything she needs to succeed." Of course they would. "Absolutely," I said. "I want nothing more than to see our financial department succeed." And you know what? I meant that. I just had a different definition of success than they did. Lisa's first week as CFO was interesting. She moved into the corner office, got the executive assistant, started attending board meetings, and she immediately began implementing the optimization schemes I'd taught her. To their credit, things seemed to go smoothly at first. The schemes were doing exactly what they were designed to do, optimizing cash flow, reducing tax liability, maximizing operational efficiency. For about 2 weeks, Richard was probably feeling pretty smug about his decision. But then the cracks started to show. It started small. Lisa missed a filing deadline because she didn't realize that one of the optimization strategies required quarterly rather than annual reporting to maintain compliance. Not a huge deal, but it resulted in a $50,000 penalty. Then she miscalculated a depreciation schedule, leading to an overstatement of assets that had to be corrected in the following quarter. Again, not catastrophic, but embarrassing and costly. But the real problems started when market conditions shifted slightly. Nothing dramatic, just normal fluctuations that happen all the time in business. My optimization schemes were designed to handle these shifts, but only if you knew how to read the warning signs and make appropriate adjustments. I'd built multiple safeguards into the systems, automated alerts, reporting triggers, review checkpoints. But Lisa either didn't understand their significance or didn't know how to respond to them appropriately. I watched from my desk as reports came in showing irregularities in our cash flow projections. I saw emails flagging discrepancies in our tax optimization calculations. I noticed that several of our automated financial systems were throwing error messages that weren't being addressed. And I didn't say anything. This is where I need to be completely honest with you. I could have spoken up. I could have pointed out the problems and helped fix them before they became serious. But I didn't. I sat at my desk, did my regular job, and watched as the financial house of cards slowly started to crumble. Was this ethical? Probably not. Was it justified? I still think so. By the end of Lisa's first month as CFO, the company had lost approximately $800,000 due to various optimization errors. Missed opportunities, incorrect filings, failed investments based on flawed projections. By the end of the second month, we were looking at losses in the millions. The board of directors was starting to ask questions, angry questions. How had our previously rock-solid financial department suddenly become a liability? What was going wrong with the optimization strategies that had been working so well for years? Richard, to his credit, tried to cover for Lisa. He'd sit in on her meetings, help her prepare reports, even brought in external consultants to review our processes. But the problems kept mounting. The thing about complex financial systems is that once they start going wrong, they tend to cascade. One error leads to another, which exposes a third problem, which creates a fourth issue. It's like pulling a thread on a sweater. Eventually, the whole thing unravels. And that's exactly what was happening. Our cash flow optimization strategy, which I'd carefully calibrated based on years of experience, was now creating liquidity problems because Lisa didn't understand when to hold positions and when to liquidate them. Our tax optimization scheme, which depended on precise timing and careful documentation, was now exposing the company to potential audits and penalties because Lisa was missing critical filing requirements. Our investment strategies, which I designed to be aggressive but safe, were now bleeding money because Lisa didn't know how to recognize and respond to market warning signs. It was like watching someone try to perform surgery with a manual they'd memorized but no understanding of anatomy. Technically, they knew all the steps, but they had no idea what to do when things didn't go according to plan. And in finance, things never go according to plan. By month 3, the situation was dire. The company was hemorrhaging money, the board was threatening to bring in an entirely new management team, and several major clients were getting nervous about our financial stability. That's when Richard came to me. I was working late, again, trying to keep up with my regular responsibilities while the financial department imploded around me, when Richard knocked on my office door. He looked terrible, stressed, exhausted, like he hadn't slept in weeks. Gone was the confident, smug executive who'd so casually discussed making me manageable. This was a man watching his career circle the drain. "Heather," he said, and his voice was different too, desperate. "I need to talk to you." "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "What's on your mind?" He sat down heavily and rubbed his face with his hands. "We have a problem, a big problem." "Oh," I kept my voice neutral, professional. "The optimization schemes. Lisa's having some trouble with them. The board is asking a lot of questions, and frankly, we need someone who really understands these systems to help us get back on track." Some trouble, that was one way to put it. "I see," I said. "What kind of help are you looking for?" "We need you to work directly with Lisa to troubleshoot the issues we're having. Maybe take the lead on some of the more complex optimizations until she gets more comfortable with them." Until she gets more comfortable. As if comfort was the issue, rather than complete lack of competence. "Richard," I said carefully, "I'm happy to help however I can, but these systems are pretty complex. It might take some time to identify and fix all the issues." "How much time?" he asked quickly. I pretended to think about it. "Well, it depends on how extensive the problems are. Without a full review, it's hard to say. Could be weeks, could be months." His face went pale. "Months? We don't have months. The board is meeting next week to discuss bringing in external management." "Interesting. That does sound serious," I said. "Maybe if I had more authority to make necessary changes, more direct control over the financial systems." "Yes," he said immediately. "Whatever you need. Full access, complete authority to restructure anything that needs restructuring. And I'd need to work directly with the board to explain what went wrong and how we're fixing it," I continued. "Of course. And I think we should probably discuss my role going forward, once we get through this crisis." He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the exact moment he realized what I was really saying. "We should definitely discuss your future role," he said quietly. "Great," I smiled. "In that case, I'd be happy to help save the company." The next few weeks were the most intense of my career. I wasn't just fixing financial problems. I was performing financial surgery on a patient that was bleeding out on the operating table. Every day brought new disasters to address, missed payments that had triggered penalty clauses, investment positions that had turned toxic, cash flow problems that were affecting our ability to meet payroll. But here's the thing. I knew exactly how to fix all of it because I designed all of it. Working 18-hour days, I systematically went through every financial system, every optimization scheme, every process that Lisa had bungled. I unwound bad positions, renegotiated damaged relationships, and rebuilt our financial foundation from the ground up. More importantly, I documented everything. Every mistake Lisa had made, every warning sign she'd ignored, every basic financial principle she'd misunderstood. I prepared detailed reports showing exactly how millions of dollars had been lost and exactly how I was recovering them. The board meeting was satisfying. I presented a comprehensive analysis of what had gone wrong, how much money had been lost, and what steps I was taking to prevent future problems. I explained, in terms that even non-financial board members could understand, how the optimization schemes required expert oversight and how that oversight had been lacking. I didn't throw Lisa under the bus exactly. I didn't have to. The numbers spoke for themselves. When I finished my presentation, there was silence for a long moment. Then the chairman of the board asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Ms. Henderson, what would you need to ensure this kind of crisis never happens again?" I was ready for that question. I'd need direct authority over all financial operations, a restructured department with appropriate staffing levels, and assurance that financial decisions would be made based on expertise rather than other considerations. The other considerations part got some knowing looks around the table. And I'd need to be in a position where I can implement necessary changes without having to go through multiple approval layers. These optimization systems require quick responses to changing conditions. "What position would that be?" asked another board member. "Chief Financial Officer," I said simply. 2 days later, Richard and Lisa were both gone, pursuing other opportunities, according to the official announcement. 3 days later, I was officially promoted to CFO with a salary that was 40% higher than what the position had been paying previously. 6 months later, the company had not only recovered all the money that had been lost during Lisa's tenure, but had actually improved our financial position significantly. My optimization schemes, properly managed, were performing better than ever. A year later, I was invited to speak at a conference about crisis management and financial recovery. I titled my presentation, "The Importance of Institutional Knowledge in Complex Financial Systems." I never mentioned the specifics of what had happened, of course. I just talked about how important it is to ensure that critical expertise isn't taken for granted, and how dangerous it can be to assume that complex systems can be operated without proper understanding. But the best part, the absolute best part, came about 6 months after I'd been promoted to CFO. I was having lunch with a colleague from another company when she mentioned that her firm had interviewed someone for a senior financial position. A young woman named Lisa something, who'd been CFO at a mid-sized company, but had apparently presided over some kind of financial disaster. "She seemed nice enough," my colleague said, "but when we started asking technical questions about financial management, it became pretty clear she was in way over her head. We couldn't figure out how she'd gotten a CFO position in the first place." I just smiled and changed the subject. "You know, people ask me sometimes if I feel bad about what happened. If I think I should have spoken up sooner, should have prevented the company from losing all that money. And honestly, I used to wrestle with that question. But then I think about Richard's phone call, his casual dismissal of my worth, his assumption that I was too stupid to figure out what was happening. I think about how they planned to steal 8 years of my work and my future, and how they made me complicit in my own betrayal. They made a choice to value connections over competence, politics over performance. They made a choice to treat me as disposable, as unmanageable. They made a choice to assume that expertise was just a collection of procedures that could be transferred like a computer file. So I made a choice too. I chose to let them learn, in the most expensive way possible, just how wrong they were. And you know what? I think it was a valuable lesson for everyone involved. The company learned the importance of valuing institutional knowledge and treating employees fairly. The board learned to look beyond surface-level qualifications when making critical hiring decisions. Richard learned that trying to manipulate people who are smarter than you is a dangerous game. And Lisa? Well, hopefully Lisa learned that there's more to being a CFO than having the right last name. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting mad. It's letting people discover the natural consequences of their own bad decisions. These days, I'm running a financial department that's stronger and more profitable than ever. I've implemented new training programs to ensure that critical knowledge is properly documented and shared. I've created succession plans that ensure continuity without vulnerability. Most importantly, I've created a culture where expertise is valued, where hard work is rewarded, and where people are promoted based on what they know, not who they know. And every time I sit in my corner office, looking out at the financial department I built and rebuilt, I remember that sometimes the best way to prove your worth isn't to demand recognition. It's to let people see what happens when they don't have you. Because at the end of the day, numbers don't lie, and neither do results. The company is thriving, my team is strong, and I wake up every morning knowing that I earned my position the hard way, twice. And honestly, that feels pretty damn good.